And welcome back to Sinews of War. In the previous episode we had to abandon our war with Russia so that Voss and Gaiden could rush down towards Istanbul to deal with a massive oncoming Ottoman army. In India we finally got things started against the Maratha Confederacy, with Costa making an assault against an enemy fort. It was a bloody battle, but eventually we surrounded and overwhelmed the defenders inside, so were able to claim our first victory. But then we were switched onto a fort defence as the Ottomans seemed to make a probing attack with just a small portion of their force against Istanbul. Their forces did very bad against us and our defences held easily, so now it's just a case of waiting to see what they'll do with the rest of their men. There is a question I've heard whispered among you. A wise and rather important question, I might add. You ask, what will happen to our world when the wars are over? You wonder what will become of all these peoples, all these lands, languages and traditions, all under the protection of one king, of one state. If you are one of those who has asked those questions, then I have good news. You do not need the answer. The situation you think of, an end to wars, a unity to the world, will never happen in your lifetimes. I say this with surety. And why is that? Because even if every other king was to bow to us, there would be those who would still fight. Servants of our own state count among those. You have all heard of the famous generals Voss and Gaiden, I am sure. If the wars were to end today, what would they do? They would turn around and fight us, fight you loyal soldiers of the United Provinces, for they are men captured in the claws of their own petty ideals, or worse yet, their personal grievances. I want everyone to understand, then, that you should not be too quick to consider all those who march beneath our flag to be with us until the end. Some of you hearing my words have likely considered the notion of disobedience, of violence against your own order. That is the way of foolish men, and that is the reason that this war, in some form or another, will continue long after our flag waves at each corner of the earth. Let matters of peace abandon your mind, for until we reach the time of a war to end all wars, there will never be peace. So we're in the aftermath of the repulsion of the Ottomans from Istanbul, and what I'm wondering is, are the rest of their armies going to come into attack as well? But actually they didn't, they were just waiting around, so it really was just some kind of probing attack. The Swedish have some action for us though. We see an army appear near Ouwater in Finland, a fleet appear to raid our trade going through West Africa there, and then an additional Swedish army appears in Finland, reinforcing the first out in the forest, meaning the enemy now have an advantage here. So we've got an engagement, not exactly an unwinnable engagement, but I remembered that I'm one turn away from the army under Ouwater receiving its reinforcements, its replenishment that is, so it'll suddenly increase in strength next turn. So I thought what we'd better do is actually withdraw from this battle and try and just fight them again in perhaps the same situation next turn. I was also concerned that the enemy's artillery is superior to mine. We have very terrible artillery in this army, need to sort that out. But I can recruit stuff from St. Petersburg to deal with that. Now the Marathi have an attack for us. I'd completely forgotten that they actually had a fleet in the East Indies, and that appears from its trade node to attack one of my fleets. Mine's smaller, but the enemy's really damaged. It looks like they're probably using captured ships here that they never actually bothered to repair. So we've got a decent chance against them since their firepower will be limited. So we're going to get this battle started. I'm folding around in two lines, one of fleets, one of fifth rates, towards the enemy's single line of all its ships together, which is gradually coming towards me against the wind. A very slow affair. Now as I got close, they actually came out of a line formation and decided to just sail right towards my line of trading ships, as you can see there, and that's actually pretty useful since that means I'm going to get all the first shots off as I just sort of cross the T in front of each individual ship, so that's handy. Meanwhile, the faster fifth rates are going to try and sneak around the enemy, using the wind to hit the enemy from the other side while they're busy fighting my fleets. So a tiny bit later, the final ship nearly coming in for its volley against the first of the enemy ships, and luckily we've managed to set it on fire, so that's a bad start for them. That first ship there is one of the ones that's not really damaged, so that's one of the most powerful ships, so we really want to focus on that and try and take it down, since it's going to be firing the most guns back at us. A lot of the other ones are limited in terms of the number of guns they have. I'm going to be using a lot of micro in this fight, trying to improve my naval skills. We're going to be firing the cannons manually to make sure we get good hits on the enemy. And here at the front of the line, we've got a little bit of a race going on. Two enemy ships almost coming into a collision course with my ship. Luckily, the fact those two ships from the enemy are so close together, it means the second one can't even fire at me, so they're limiting their firepower further here, and the one in front is really damaged. So we're going to be firing right into their hull at point blank range. They're doing the same to me, but actually just surprisingly little damage, so that's quite handy. I'm trying now to turn around to get behind them and fire into their stern, but we're a little bit stuck. But eventually we start sorting this mess out and get to a point where we can start firing on these compacted enemy ship formations, and this is actually great. Because when we're firing at a ship with another enemy ship behind it, the shots that miss have a second chance to hit something of the enemies. So we're doing extra damage, and some of our ships are firing with both their broadsides, really maximising their firepower. And the Fluids do have a lot of guns. They have just as many guns as a 5th rate, despite being an inferior class of ship. So we're going to be doing decent damage. And we get another brilliant situation here where two of our ships surround this enemy 5th rate and start blasting it from both sides. It's a Fluid on the left and one of our 5th rates on the right. And the enemy are actually trying to board my Fluid but surrender. They realise it's not going to happen as they're taking point blank range fire, and I started firing grape shot into them from the 5th rate, which would have killed their crew before the boarding would even get going. So that's fantastic. One of the enemy's major ships is now surrendering. So next we just need to start hunting down all the other ships, which are going to be in a little bit of trouble as we start to gain numerical advantage over the enemy. So I'm going to try and sneak around that Xebec there and fire into the back. This ship here going to fire into the front of this enemy 5th rate, which is slowly turning to face me, but we're going to get the volley first. That 5th rate's hull very damaged, and the enemy's morale is going to be shaken the whole time, because they were already very worried about the fact that their hulls were damaged at the start of the battle. So every time I damage them some more, they are going to be very nervous about their ships actually sinking. One of the enemy Xebecs takes a volley to the stern and lose their main mast. They start routing, but now they'll struggle to escape without the help of their main sail. So they're basically stuck, freeing up yet more of my ships to join the engagements against other ships. That ship on the bottom of the screen there is actually just going to run away from the engagement, leaving one of their comrades behind to face basically my whole fleet. And we're going to start using manual volleys to just pound it here, getting a volley that sneakily hits the surrendered ship behind it as well, so we're not really respecting their surrender very well. So two volleys in quick succession damage the ship, but they keep their nerve and keep sailing. I thought they might surrender at that point, taking two quick volleys, but by the time the guns have reloaded for a second volley on them, they actually start routing. I decided to fire at them anyway, both to keep them routing and perhaps to try and force them to surrender, and I think they actually do surrender in the end, but they are going to rout quite far away first. So that's all well and good. That leaves only one enemy ship. There they go, they did surrender. One enemy ship for us to take down, and we have to sail after it because they've got the wind and are way ahead of us in trying to escape. But they actually came back after a while and did allow us to fight them. So that was a bad move from the AI, because now they're going to have to go up against all of my ships. And they basically came in for one pass, immediately turned around and started running away again when they realized they actually need to withdraw from this battle. Getting a really long range volley with this ship here, just about hitting the enemy. And at this stage, as they come in for another close range battle with that 5th rate, they are going to rout. I actually chased them during the routing phase for a while to try and get them to surrender or perhaps board them, but they didn't. So that is exactly the kind of decisive victory the East India Company needed.
Magnificent! I told you Indians can't sail to save their lives. They buy up old European ships to make themselves look pretty, but really they can't tell a bow from a stern. So, you know what that means? Their fleets in Madagascar and along the coast of India suddenly seem a lot less ominous. The destruction of the Marathi at sea will give us complete control of the theatre. This is how the West India oafs did it. They had the mad sea dog Kalimba scaring everyone off the seas. If only young Derwin hadn't gone and got himself a free ticket to the locker. With him we'd control everything from the Cape of Africa to Japan. I should have reeled him in, should have left the grunt work to others. But forget it. Victory will leave no room for regrets. From the results, we see that the damage to our ships was really minimal considering the amount of enemy ships that we've taken down, and we've actually captured 4 of them, only 1 enemy ship getting away, so that's quite nice. So we've got 3 5th rates and a Zebek. I'm going to scrap the Zebek for prize money and add the 3 5th rates to my fleet. They're all going to be beaten up, so they're not ready to fight again, but that increases the size of the trade fleet on the node, so we'll actually make a decent amount of money off that. So very slowly, there goes the Maratha fleet sinking to the bottom. Fantastic news, and we may also be able to go and capture whatever node they were occupying before this war to make us even more money from this event. Now back in Istanbul, I'm still focusing on upping the strength of our forces, going to replenish all the losses we took in the Ottoman assault and now start looking to get more troops in there because we want to have as solid a defense as possible, but the main increase to our power in the area is of course the arrival of Voss and Gaiden, who can just about come and stand next to the city. So if all of those millions of Ottoman armies wanted to make an attack, now they have to face a very stern defense from our side, so we'll see if they dare. Now the Marathi did indeed leave a trade node free with the loss of their fleet, so we're going to send some ships over to take it. We now have 3 of the 5 nodes in the East Indies, so this is going pretty well. One of them still held by the invincible Spanish fleet, of course, so it's going to take us a while to ever get that one. So I basically sent most of the damaged ships to go and sit on that trade node. I'm not going to bother going to send them back to repair them. We'll just use them for making money. What I do need to do is keep building ships here in Ceylon. You can see I've got 3 4th rates prepared. I'm trying to get an actual combat fleet together to go and deal with the Marathi fleets, who are both in port. They've got lots of 5th rates and smaller ships, so I'm hoping that by bringing 4th rates we'll be able to outclass them, and I can use infantry to push those ships out to sea and then decisively defeat them. But before any of that, we might as well continue trying to gain dominance on land, which is of course more important. So Costa, having completed his fighting there in the southeast, is going to now start chasing after De Beers along with our reserve stack. So we can't reach it this turn. That means if the Maratha Confederacy do come with reinforcements to attack De Beers, he could be in trouble and probably would even just retreat if that was to happen, but we will see if they bother. Now switching back to Ouwater, we've got the Swedish army still waiting for us, but I've got some artillery ready to join his army, so we're going to be able to power ourselves up a little bit. We've also now finished our replenishment, so I'm going to put the artillery in. That does mean I won't have movement enough to go and attack those armies this turn, but if they wait around or give me another chance, we will be able to take them down, and we'll have a much better chance than we did if I had engaged them when they first appeared. They've got about a full stack altogether. I think it's still a relatively balanced engagement even now, but that slight edge we get from having full units and from using battlefield tactics, of course, should mean we'll be able to bring those armies down and continue on our way. I'm going to have a little look now using a ship to find out what Sweden's got going on. First I have to garrison the port near St. Petersburg so the enemy can't come and sneakily take it if the ship doesn't come back this turn. And I'm going to send out this sloop after having trouble actually selecting it to do some scouting. We see they have nothing in the garrison at Finland. They've got a decent amount of forces around their capital which don't appear to be doing anything. And then we get an interesting discovery. Up here in the far north they have got a small combat fleet and a full stack of troops. It appears they are preparing for a naval invasion of something. Of course we don't know what, and the naval range of ships is so large in DarthMod that they could be landing pretty much anywhere, including just landing at Amsterdam, which would be a massive problem. We only have a few combat ships here, perhaps enough to repel their fleet if they try to blockade the port or something, but it's not going to be enough to stop them just landing troops further down the coast, and then we'll have a full stack in the core of our territory, which could be a problem. So in the Swedish turn, they interestingly split their forces up, with one army going to stand behind the line of our advance. Not sure what's going on there. The Marathi and the Ottomans don't do anything with their turn, so no events there. So that Swedish army seems to be asking for destruction. It just stood there, it didn't withdraw when I challenged it to battle, so I thought, well, let's just auto-resolve them away, and the result was pretty fine. So survivors will escape, and they actually go back into that Swedish star fort. And this is actually really annoying because their forces are probably sufficient to take St. Petersburg because the garrison is so small. So we need to try and prepare for that. I'm going to bring the infantry that I placed in the docks back into the town since they don't need to be there anymore, as my sloop did come back from its expedition. And I'm going to recruit one more unit. I'm going to hope that's going to be enough to sort out everything over there, because I don't want Ouwater to be distracted from his main mission of going towards Finland. So we'll keep going and hunt down the Swedish main force. Ouwater getting some increases to his traits there. He's now a pretty decent general after all the fights he's been through, despite one of them being an absolutely massive defeat. So that's pretty useful, and his second
second, Vermeer's is pretty promising as well. So we've got some good officers up here in the far north. Hopefully they'll be able to bring us some form of victory to this war with Sweden, which you may recall is all actually just in support of the 13 colonies, our ally. But anyway, back to India, where now our forces are going to be able to all come to this one siege. So we've got 3 stacks all together. The stack inside probably doesn't stand a chance, especially because it's taking siege attrition. And I actually realised here they only have 2 turns of supplies. So although I could probably just auto-resolve and take this city, we might as well just siege them out and do it without any losses, or try and draw the Maratha main force down for a decisive battle. That would be quite nice as well. Now there's another project I want to get going, which I've already talked about before. I wanted to attack New Spain, but first I was trying to build ships so that we'd have a naval advantage over them. And I'm looking around here, you see in the game, because I thought I'd already set all the ships to be built and that they would now be ready, but apparently I hadn't. So now there's going to be a further delay as I actually build the ships we need to take out the new Spanish fleet. We don't want to start the war and then have the fleet blockade ports or destroy our own fleet, because we're going to need a lot of naval maneuverability, and of course we want to keep all of our massive income from all of the sea trade in the area. So some of the weaker ships in Kalimba's fleet are going to be thrown out of there because we want to make space for some larger warships. I'll just send them to help out with the trading in Brazil for now. On the way we actually discover yet more new Spanish ships just sitting in the middle of nowhere doing nothing, so that's good to know at least. So this war will happen eventually. Many of the officers are veterans of North America and Europe. They are confident that affairs in Central and South America will proceed no differently to how they are accustomed. But I worry that with so much of their legacy accredited to the wisdom of the late Lord Nassau, that when things become desperate they will see me as a poor vessel for their confidence. The more I try to train them for the campaign, the more they seem to believe I am foolish for thinking they need training at all. And so I feel rather cowed to the whims of the senior NCOs, anything to avoid their disapproving murmurs. I almost relish the thought of finding myself in a disastrous battle, just to get the long-awaited test of my true mettle out of the way. Those Swedish ships that started raiding my trade off West Africa are in trouble actually, because my trade ships that I happen to have on the single node that we occupy far outnumber theirs, so I thought we might as well go and just bring them down. And some 13 colony ships actually come in to help, making this extra easy, so we annihilate the enemy and even capture one of their ships. So we're going to bring that into the fleet, and now we can just go back to trading and use the Swedish ship to enhance our own trade income. So that went quite well. We punished the Swedish for their little raiding. I guess they didn't see our fleet right there, but it was certainly a bad place to start doing it. Anyway, now against the Ottomans we have to do a bit of shuffling, because you have to actually go into the garrison of Istanbul in order to get to the other side, because it actually takes up the entire land peninsula there. So we're going to shift Gaiden and Voss through onto the other side. I don't have a particular plan. I was initially thinking I would go on the offensive, but looking at how many Ottoman armies there are, I think it would be nicer if first maybe 1 or 2 of them came and sacrificed themselves in the attack, so I decided to wait and see what happens. And one thing that did happen was the Marathi sallied out against me where I have them under siege, and the balance bar was even, and I thought surely it must be lying, because we have 3 full stacks of professional troops at full strength, and their force is already damaged by the siege. So in the end I thought, you know what, I'm just going to auto-resolve that. I think the balance bar is broken, and they lost 3 times more than we did, so I think it was the case that the balance bar was just even for some reason. So that's their defending force really cut down to size now. They're probably not going to be able to do any more action over there. So I moved the rake forwards to have a little look at the Ottoman forces so we could see what they all are, and actually discovered a whole nother stack waiting there in reserve. And seeing all these forces here, it made me think. I thought surely the Ottomans have deployed everything they have if they've got so many stacks right here. And that made me realise, of course, wait a minute, the rest of their territory is probably undefended as a result. So what we can do is go and just take the rest of their territory and hold the defensive line here rather than going on the offensive through their strongest point. So Voss is going to sneak round down to Greece, where he can board ships and go and attack other Ottoman territories in the same style that Voorhees of the West India Company did before he was recalled. We've got a fleet right here which can easily transport us about, so hopefully that will allow me to destroy the Ottomans without even having to face their main force or cause the main force to get out of the way. Now, on the Swedish front, we're going to continue marching into Finland. Their main force is spotted, the remnants of their main force, that is, it's sitting there as a garrison to the town, but nothing too special. I'm just going to go and besiege it. It's a balanced situation, and there's only a few turns of supplies in there, so I thought, well, we'll just siege them out. There's no real rush to take this place. We have absolutely no reason at all to be conquering Sweden, other than that we happen to be at war with them and it's something to do. Now, the Maratha Confederacy, for some reason, sally once again, and the balance spot again is even. It must be lying, because now they have even fewer forces than last time, so something's broken here. So I just quickly auto-resolve that. We destroy them once again, and we actually take the settlement as a result of that. We also see the Maratha look like they're conquering down to the east there, although the Mughal Empire have a strong force inside the settlement they've got besieged. What I wanted to do as a result of this was just watch. I'm going to bring Costa over to sit near the border and watch that siege going on over there, because the second the Maratha take it, we want to strike and take it back, or take it from them, before they rebuild their forces, because this means we're going to be gaining more territory in India without having to declare war on the Mughal Empire quite yet, which is quite handy. Now, I've captured a new school, so I wanted to see if I could give it something to research, but the problem right now is that I'm basically researching everything, and the few things left to research would take so long to actually complete that the campaign will probably be over by the time we actually finish the research. So I thought, you know, we might as well not bother expanding our research capacity anymore. We've already got so much of a tech advantage. We don't need to keep having universities, so from now on, I'm just going to burn down any schools or universities I find and replace them with churches or industry in order to help in other areas. Now, I thought we might as well continue on the offensive against the Maratha. The public order here is pretty bad, but it should be stable enough once I've done all the repairs that I can move one of these stacks away. So one stack will have to stay behind to garrison it, but the other stack can start working on the next settlement. So I'm just going to hold the next settlement over at siege. If they sally, it'd be a little bit more dangerous than in that previous siege, but I think we could win, and we'll be able to take that with just Tobias. So hopefully the reserve army will be fine to sit here and replenish as a garrison to stop a rebellion, and Costa can always move over if he needs to.
They moved like a great flood, rushing towards our lines with a raging cry. Some men were spooked, started firing far too early. But quickly we had the drills running smoothly. Volley after volley was unleashed on them. Yet still they got closer and closer. Suddenly there was a great whooshing over our heads. Among the enemy ranks, the earth was torn up beneath them, killing any who did not jump to the ground at once. As they stood to continue their advance, we gave them another quick cycle of musketry, more accurate this time as they were properly ranged and the men had removed their bayonets to ease the strain of presenting arms. Soon smoke obscured all, and the enemy faded back into the city. Such slaughter is now the ordinary approach. I was checking to see if that Spanish fleet was still there in the East Indies, and I realised something. This fleet, which has destroyed many of our own fleets already with seemingly no damage to itself, is led by someone who I recognise, not the name, but the face. So keep that face in mind, and now I thought I'll go and check who I think it is. It's Voss! The guy leading their fleet is actually Voss's long-lost twin brother, so that surely explains why that admiral is so powerful. What we really need is to unite them once again. If we could get that Spanish admiral to join us, we would have the greatest land general and the greatest sea admiral at our command. But anyway, that shall have to be a dream for the future. Right now, we're going to destroy those Ottoman ports so that we don't have to bother raiding their trade routes anymore, and now use the main fleet to transport Voss's force over to attack the Ottomans. So he is going to stack up inside, and we just have to pick a target, really. I decided that what we should best do is go and attack Jerusalem, the same thing we did with Voorhees back when he was here, because the port is right next to the city, and that means we can land forces and only need a tiny bit of movement to actually go right into an attack and try and take a region right away for maximum effectiveness of this surprise attack. So we're going to try and do that. First, I'm going to struggle to get Voss to disembark from the ships. Eventually, we're ready, and he does just about have enough movement to make the short distance to attack the city. Has a small advantage. I'm probably going to need to do this one myself though and make sure it goes okay. And of course, once we take Jerusalem, we may be able to just storm the rest of the Ottoman Empire. So we want to do this with as few losses as possible and move on really quickly.
We're going to open with the standard fort battling strategy, the enemy taking up positions on their walls to fire at us, and we're keeping our infantry hidden to try and resist that fire. These guys over on the north side of the fort are trying to hide in this forest. They are unfortunately though in range of the enemy's mortars, who seem to be able to see them. So I'm going to be shifting these guys around to try and stop the mortar from being able to see them. Eventually I had to just pull them back entirely because the mortar appeared to have some form of magical ability to hit these guys. Meanwhile, my main force coming from the west is hiding behind a crest of hills that stops the enemy's fort guns from actually hitting them, so that worked pretty well. So now we just have to wait like half an hour to destroy part of the enemy's fort wall with my own artillery. So here we are, more than half an hour actually later on. We've destroyed part of the wall and I've bombarded the centre of the enemy's fort with the artillery, killing a decent number of the troops inside actually. We probably killed a couple of hundred of the enemy defenders, loads of their camel gunners. What I really hoped to kill was their mortar team. We're trying to disable some of the pieces. Unfortunately I wasn't able to do that. I did destroy 3 of the 4 howitzers inside the fort, so that is useful, but it's going to be the mortars really doing the damage on the approach, and you can see they're firing away at me because the approach has already begun at this stage. And just as feared, the mortars doing damage to my men as they come in. They're running ahead but still taking casualties on the approach to the fort wall. Not much we can do about that though. Now some of the enemy's camel gunners decided to come out of the breach and get shot by my men, so that was nice of them. But a more interesting move was that they opened the gates while I was climbing the wall and charged their heavy infantry out to engage in melee, and that seems like a decent plan because now part of the unit caught down on the ground has to engage with the full enemy unit. The rest of the men who've climbed up aren't facing any resistance because the enemy abandoned the walls as I approached, but now that I'm up here they decided they actually do want the walls and started charging their men right back up in order to try and take it. So this means there's now going to be one of those brutal siege melees where everyone fights everyone on that wall. My attack from the northern face of the fort going to get started now as well to add men to the mix. There's a few units up there we'll have to kill before we can move on. One of the enemy's melee units came out of the fort breach as well, brandishing those massive two-handed axes and charging into my line infantry, so that's probably a good move from them. The problem though is that they're totally surrounded by my cavalry who are just waiting to go through the breach. So now everything's going to charge in against them, including a rear attack against them led by Voss himself, bringing all of the cav to just absolutely smash through the enemy ranks. So hopefully that melee will now go in our favour with everything in there, and we'll basically free up these units to go into the middle of the fort, which is now relatively undefended because all of their infantry have been committed to these battles on the walls. Those battles not exactly going to go well for either side. It's just going to be an attritional fight where both sides take losses. We'll kill the enemy slightly faster than they kill us, but still the losses on our side are going to be large. You can see our bodies are already all over the floor of this section of the wall. The enemy force is busily glitching out as they tend to do in siege battles, but hopefully that's not enhancing their combat capabilities too much, because it definitely looks like something formidable. So on the northern face, a similar fight going on as Valdek infantry climb over the battlements and start engaging with some of the enemy's lighter infantry. Going to have a hard time though because we didn't send so many troops in that direction. Luckily the cavalry are now able to get inside and take out the enemy's remaining artillery crews, among which was their commander, lowering their morale, and more importantly we are now sitting on the victory point, and with all of the enemy's infantry committed to fights, they're unlikely to come and retake it from me. So we just have to wait for the countdown to run out, but the entire time loss is mounting up very heavily in the grind on the walls as both sides just absolutely slaughter each other. Soon enough though the slaughter is cooled off as the timer runs out, so it is a victory, but we lost over 1,000 men. I was hoping we could do it with fewer losses than that, the enemy losing loads, over 3,000. But we know the Ottomans have a seemingly unlimited supply of troops, so that might not be a good enough ratio. Many of our units taking extreme damage, of course, getting a lot of kills for that damage as well, but as I said, against the Ottomans, maybe that just isn't enough of a good ratio. The artillery doing very well to killing hundreds without any losses for their own side. So, Jerusalem is taken. The first stage in my plan to storm the Ottoman Empire has succeeded. We'll have to see how the rest goes. The Ottomans had hoped to exploit the efforts of their historic enemy, the Russians, by striking back into Europe while the Dutch armies were embroiled in bitter combat further north. But the Russians had already seen that it was not by sheer luck that the men of the United Provinces had marched to conquest all over Europe. When the Ottomans began to move, the Russians were more than happy to agree to a peace, with borders redrawn along the current battle lines, costing them a huge area and their second capital. Now the fear that had been struck into the Russians was to travel south and paralyze the Ottoman invasion force, who mostly refused to attack Dutch positions. And the longer they stalled, the more powerful their adversary became. So thanks for watching. We'll be following the conflicts now in all 3 theatres next time on Sinews of War.